Hey, welcome back to the number one podcast in the world, the Cellarcast, episode 101. And I'm a little bit sad because I really wanted to record this one with Kat. The last couple days have been really fun. She was over at my house. So this past weekend was Fanimecon, which is an anime convention that is in San Jose. And Kat, because of transportation. So we both had tickets, 4-day tickets to go to this. Kat's mom bought me the 4-day ticket as like a late birthday present. Thank you, Kat's mom. Thank you. Very nice of her. Which is really the only reason I was able to afford that. To make travel easier. Because it's a bit of a distance to get to San Jose for us. She stayed over at my house so that we would both just move as one unit. Because we do not have enough money. I need many more patrons to afford a hotel. So, for even like 2 nights or something. So Kat's just been here. We've just been hanging out for the last 4 days. And I really wanted to record a podcast with her in person because it's fun, right? And it was on Sunday, and we usually do it, and we were just too damn tired. We were just too tired, and we got home too late, and we got back from the last day today on Monday when I'm recording this, and she was like, "Oh, should we record when we get home?" And then we got home and we were just dead tired. We were just dead, and so we both just before she had to leave around like 5. We got home at like 2 or 3, and we just like took a nap. We just both took a nap before she had to go. So unfortunately, she's not here, but it would have been very fun. So everyone in your minds, simulate a cat podcast, an in-person cat podcast. Yeah, so I guess I just have to talk about it on everything on my own. And I do have a couple things that I want to talk about this week. First of all, I'm going to really quickly go over what happened before Fanime, which is a stream that I did the other day, finally playing 40k Warhammer 40k Boltgun. So this is the new 40k boomer shooter, or retro style movement shooter, coming to us from who Focus isn't the developer, are they? I don't think they are, or they're just the publisher. I should have checked this before. It's Auroch Digital, right? Auroch Digital. So this is a new. It's just published by Focus. So this is the new 40k boomer shooter that just came out. I've been anticipating this for quite a while since it got announced, because it's one of those concepts that you hear about and you're like, oh, of course, like why didn't this come out earlier? I'm all for a wider variety of 40k games. The thing about 40k games is that like a lot of them end up being strategy games, in some form or another, right? There's not a lot of action games in the 40k setting, which is a bit of a shame because strategy games all cool, but like it's a tabletop war strategy game. It would be neat to explore it in a different way, right? That's one of the reasons that like Space Marine, the original Space Marine, was so warmly received by the 40k community, because despite the fact that I wouldn't call it like an incredible game, it's pretty good, but you actually get to walk around in 40k environments and get up close and look at things and do live combat, and all that stuff is really cool. It's such a cool universe and setting, awesome characters and designs, and just getting to be like actually on the ground level of it is very enticing. And Boltgun definitely, like, if you're a 40k fan, you'll probably love Boltgun. Like, you will adore it. um and I think even if you don't know anything about 40k, and I think this is a good test, right? Because there's good games for fans. It's like a lot with a lot of JoJo games. It's like, well, some of these are good. They're good. You get to be a good JoJo game without being a super great fighting game kind of thing. You're talking about like All Star Battle or something like that. Um, uh, uh, but I think that this game really succeeds from both perspectives. So first of all, I'll get the 40k nerd stuff out of the way. The environments are wonderfully crafted. I want to mention real quick. I haven't gotten a chance to. I beat the first chapter, which is very long. It's very long, very meaty game from what it seems so far. I have not finished it, so this is all basically the first, let's say, third to half of the game. That's what I'm talking about. I haven't gotten a chance to play it because literally the next day Kat came over and just haven't had time. The environments, I'm assuming a lot of this stuff is going to remain consistent for the game. The gameplay stuff might change a little bit as the game goes on, but all this stuff that I'm going to talk about right now is I feel like is pretty consistent throughout. Environments are fantastic. They're extremely detailed. The game is interestingly enough a like light sequel to the original Space Marine shooter, the third-person shooter that was on the Xbox 360 and the PS3. Yeah, it's a sequel to that game. It basically takes place on the same planet, with the idea is that you are an Ultramarine as part of a squad that's been sent in to clean up the sort of lingering warp fuckery that happened from that game, where like a bunch of portals to the warp, aka hell, opened up. So you gotta go do some cleanup. All of your squad members die because of a botched deployment of your landing pod. So you're the sole survivor, and you got to do some doom shit. Yeah, speaking of Space Marines, okay, I had to double check that I was using the right mic. I get so antsy sometimes that when I forget to check. Yeah, so you're walking around on Graia, I think is the name of it's a forge world. And just these like really intricate the gothic sci-fi architecture that's like a hallmark of the Imperium in 40k. Where I was just looking around at some of these areas, and there's so many just little details of that didn't have to be there, with patterns carved into walls, or what would you describe it? Just like polygons, just like extra little polygons of like the slope of a roof, or an indent of a design of like the ridge of a wall or something like that. Like, if you just look around, like really a lot of care put into the environments in this game. Even having this sort of low poly aesthetic, which actually kind of makes that stuff stand out more, right? Because it doesn't really blur together. I feel like when you have a really high fidelity, like high polygon count kind of modern game, it's easy to just sort of everything just kind of blurs together. All the polygons in the environment or in the character models blur together. But when you're working with something that's a little boxier, a little squarer, where you can actually see the seams and where the triangles are being drawn, you can actually appreciate some of that stuff a little more. So that stuff, just tremendous. I really like that the Space Marine that you're playing as is a beaky boy. So there's a kind of funny excuse me, there's kind of a funny thing going on where, I think the reveal trailer for this game was the idea was like, oh, someone pulling out their old box, you know, looking through their attic, pulling out their old box of Warhammer miniatures from like the 80s or the early 90s. And if you go and look at artwork of you know, this game, like the cover, the helmet that the Space Marine is wearing, it has that like beak, very distinctive beaked design. And that was kind of the original look for Space Marines back in 40K, I believe, first debuted in like 87. That was just kind of one of the main looks, the more recognizable design for like the helmets with like the big, it looks like a scowling face. That was introduced later. It's the Mark 7 armor, and then the beaked design was then kind of later. You know, when they were hammering out the lore a little bit more, was dubbed there was the Mark 6 armor. That's how they explained the design change. But yeah, that was the like original Rogue Trader, like basically first and second edition look for Space Marines for a couple years. I don't know if maybe by second edition they'd already jumped to, I think they'd already jumped to like, you know, the Mark 7 design actually. But yeah, that's an old school style Space Marine, but funny enough, with some sort of new aesthetics. Games Workshop has been really into doing like official paint jobs of like Ultramarines specifically, because Ultramarines are the poster boys of painting them with white helmets, which honestly I think does look pretty cool. Ultramarines have that very like, you know, blue, gold, white color scheme, and the white helmets makes like the red eyelids like or like eye lenses on them kind of stand out. And then also like the cross on the knee pad, that's like specifically a very modern miniature design that they do, that GW does. If you look at like the new 10th edition Terminators, they look very similar. It's like a very similar design if you compare that to the main Space Marine in this game. So kind of like a funny how would I even describe it, mix of old and modern 40K design sensibilities, which I'm down for. I just appreciate him being the beaky boy, because you know, you would think I'm usually like a little meh to like nostalgia pandering, but strangely enough, Games Workshop almost never does that. They very rarely go for the nostalgia play. In fact, people are often annoyed because they phase out old miniatures, you know, classic miniatures from the lineup. Like when they debuted the Primaris Marines, you know, new armor mark. Oh, we don't have the old Mark 7 armor design anymore. Well, they still do have it, I mean, right? But like, they were really pushing, you know, Primaris everything, Primaris Lieutenant. Look at the Primaris Lieutenant. It's always, GW is very like, new thing. Check out this new thing. And they don't really pander or play to the nostalgia factor. So I actually appreciated that. Yeah, I want to say that's it for me nerding out about the 40K stuff in this game. So on to like the more just like game critique of the game itself. This is really good, and it's curious because if you look at Auroch Digital's history as a developer, this is very out of their wheelhouse. Someone, when I was streaming, said that they had looked up their previous history, and it's all pretty much board game adaptations, like strategy board game adaptations. And then all of a sudden they come out with this extremely fast-paced first-person shooter like throwback kind of thing. And you know, it's one of those things where you're looking at it and it's like, oh, okay, you look at their history, like, did do they know what they're doing with this? This is very different from anything they've put out before. And I saw some gameplay of it. It was like a 2-minute gameplay demo video before the game released, and I thought the game actually looked pretty bad. I didn't think it looked very good. It looked very sluggish and kind of choppy, if that makes sense. And then I realized, oh, this video is from IGN. They're probably, it looks bad, but you have to remember the IGN factor, that they know how they always manage to get the person to record the gameplay footage who just makes the game look like shit. I don't know how they do it. They just consistently get people who do not make games look good. Like when I see a fast-paced movement, boomer shooter like this, I want to see like that flow of like moving and running and shooting and switching weapons and picking up power-ups and things. I want to see that. The intense fast-paced combat puzzle, solving action. And I was not getting it from that. So I was like a little like, okay, cautiously optimistic. Having played it, at least the first chapter, I can say that it's very impressive. It is really impressive for this being their... So, okay, a few things. I would describe this as a really, really impressive, really commendable first outing for this style of game. There are some issues. There's some issues, and I've heard of some issues for people who have finished the game, that I can buy it. That would be that the design of the levels. I got the issues out of the way first of all. What I noticed was the design of the levels could sometimes be a little labyrinthine, a little too mazy and a little too samey looking. We're like, where am I? Okay, I had to get my bearings a lot of the time, and the signposting wasn't always fantastic. Where there was one time I literally, did this big arena section. And after it was done and every enemy was dead, I just was like, wait, where did I come from? Which way did I come from? Which way am I supposed to go now? It was just not, it wasn't super clear, and the design of the arena kind of led me like in the wrong direction. It was kind of confusing. I just walked around for like 5 minutes before I figured out that where I was supposed to go. And what's funny is that it was like a giant gate. It was like a big open gate, and I completely forgot that wasn't where I came from. So maybe that's on me, but things kind of similar to that happened a couple times throughout the game, and it's not the worst thing ever. It's helped a lot by the fact that you move really fast. I've seen people joke about like, it's like lore accurate Space Marine movement, but no, actually, really. Space Marines are fucking strong, and they can run really fast. That's one thing that I'm hoping, Space Marine 2 improves a little bit from the original. Is like, the original was really like, this is Gears of War, and you're moving at Gears of War speeds. Whereas Space Marines in lore, they're kind of just like freight trains. Like, they can go. And in this game, it's maybe a little bit exaggerated, but yeah, the speed and the power is definitely felt. It's just see, now I'm getting into positives. I was trying to talk about negatives, but now I'm getting into positives. It's kind of hard because even the things that are like not great about the game kind of end up wrapping around back into like connecting to positive things, which is why I think it's pretty telling of generally like the quality there. So like running around, there's a run button, which I thought was weird, but it makes sense sometimes. Sometimes running is very fast, and sometimes you don't want to go that fast. Like moving and jumping, and there's a pretty decent system of like vaulting, or what is it called? No, not vaulting, mantling, like grabbing an edge, lifting yourself up. You're very mobile, and there's a lot of time. There's a lot of you can go a lot of places in this game, and the game is generally not afraid to let you go there, which I like. So when there are these like, if you weren't really fast, I think the level design could get a lot more grading, because you do have to do there's some backtracking. There's some of just like, where do I go? What do I what am I supposed to be doing now again? But the fact that you can get from A to B to C pretty quickly, it definitely helps. It eases the pain quite a bit. I've also heard that the game kind of fizzles out a little bit. I mean, hey, it's a boomer shooter. They tend to do that. They tend to do that. Most of the best boomer shooters of all time have very lackluster last thirds. Or, last, 10-20%. But I can believe that. I haven't gotten there yet, but that's what I've heard. I can't speak on the validity of it, but I can believe it. I can say that of what I played, the best parts of the game are, they nailed the feeling of the game. This game feels really good to play in a lot of ways. Mind you, I was also playing on hard, so the challenge was amped up a little bit. I was feeling the heat, I think, about 3 levels into it. The first 2 were pretty easy. The first 2 levels were like a total cakewalk. And then you kind of start hitting a couple arenas that are pretty challenging. Enemies with a decent amount of health and like tricky patterns or that are pretty dangerous and throwing a lot of them at you. The arena design is generally pretty strong. What are they talking about? Oh yeah, the feeling of the game. I'm getting a little sidetracked. First and foremost, like, this is a movement shooter. You're moving and shooting. Does the moving and shooting feel good? Yes, I already went over it, but movement feels really good. It's fast, it's very responsive. You can basically point to where you want to go, and you can usually get there. A running jump will take you places. That is great. The weapons, for the most part, feel very good. Of the ones that I've got, I think I've gotten about half the weapons. They feel good. The titular bolt gun, the bolter, classic, the standard Space Marine weapon. It's the assault. What do they call it? The assault rifle in Halo. This is almost like the assault rifle of 40k, except way stronger. It doesn't shoot the bolters in 40k. They don't shoot bullets. They shoot little missiles that explode. And completely lighting up an enemy, and there's just a ton of the jibbing and the viscera is great. Just a ridiculous amount of like visual feedback. The sound effects for the most part are very very chunky, very heavy. Someone pointed out during the stream that the heavy bolter could feel a little heavier, in terms of the sound effect. But I could see. I think it's serviceable. It's got a fine sound, but the plasma rifle feels great. Just like you feel like you're evaporating people when you hit them with the plasma rifle. Really, so far of the first half of the weapon selection, very nice. Like, it's pretty straightforward arsenal. The bolter is just like. What would you just automatic fire, shoot a lot of things gun, but somewhat lighter damage. You have a shotgun that feels pretty good. It's a pretty good shotgun. Plasma rifle, which is just this high energy projectile, just almost a rocket launcher, to be honest. In function, but also you can like really rapid fire it, and it has the cooldown, like it can overheat. Okay, yeah, great. Like a plasma rifle. Heavy bolter is just a really strong chain gun. Like it is a heavy version of the bolter you already have, and it works approximately like you would expect it to. It slows you down while you're moving. because you can't move and fire heavy weapons in the tabletop game, or you get a shooting penalty, something like that. Also changes sometimes depending on the action or the weapon, but whatever. The weapons behave like how you would expect the Space Marine weapons to behave, and for the most part, they feel pretty great. They feel really good to fire. The feedback that you get from hitting things is almost a little too much. There are some... It's never, like, too bad. It's never to the point where I got, like, frustrated, but there was some visibility issues where, like, wow, that's a lot of blood exploding everywhere. And it's kind of obscuring my vision a little bit when I'm trying to see other enemies coming at me. Oh, quick side note. I have a little bit of a pet peeve for games that have blood splat on the screen, like literally like on your, on your HUD when you kill an enemy close by. Because when I see blood on the screen, my brain assumes that it means that I took damage. This game doesn't have that. It has like I don't know if there's ever been like a real technical term for it. I've always called it the damage compass, which is like it's where you get hit and you have a little like red indicator around your crosshair to show you like what direction you got hit from. This game has that, but I still associate a blood splat on screen with me taking damage and not like, the blood splashing onto my visor or whatever it's supposed to be. So that's just like a pet peeve thing I have. It's very minor. But yeah, this game does do that, and it slightly confuses me. It's just like a response that my eyes have. This is a response that my brain has to that kind of effect that I can't really change for some reason. Yeah, so the huge amounts of viscera in the game never really got too bad. But it was like, I could see it maybe being a problem sometimes. It was very close to being an issue, but it didn't end up, in practice, was not too bad. What else? Oh, I guess I could... So the enemy design is also really solid. There's a good variety of enemies. It's pretty much all chaos. All the enemies are chaos. So you've got cultists, and then you kind of jump up to demons, and they each have some pretty interesting... They have good enough differentiation between them. Some of that orthogonal unit differentiation, as it's called, as the kids call it, or as I usually say to make it easier because that's like a term that'll get you like a swirly. I call it the chess piece enemy design, where every enemy has a unique function that is distinct from one another. So there's like pretty much all the cultist enemies have pretty light health, like they're kind of pushovers, but they can have some pretty dangerous weaponry. Some of them are very there's very basic, like, okay, this is just a cultist with a machine gun, which actually isn't too big of a deal. Enemies have very wide firing spreads. There's no hit scan guns in this game. It's all projectile. From what I can tell, at least, it's mostly projectile, but none of the enemies have hits. None of the enemies have hit scan. A lot of them have like very wide, like shots. So they'll shoot like a bunch of bullets at you, but most of them will miss. It actually feels pretty cool. It feels like it's a cool feeling. I don't know. It has that effect, like you're dodging a bunch of bullets. So those are just kind of like sort of light, like they're there and they are a threat, but they're a low priority, like, low priority enemies. Then you have like, okay, here's like the lighter health cultists, but they have a heavy machine gun, right? They've got they can do more damage to you, or they have a plasma rifle that's gonna like explode essentially when it lands near you. And then the demon designs, which are actually Really cool. One of the funny things, I don't, maybe they'll show up later in the game. I've seen 0 corn demons. There's been like 0 cornate demons. Those are usually the go-tos in 40k games for demon enemies, is the corn demons, because they look the most traditionally demon-y, like the blood letters and stuff. It almost feels like they've gone out of their way to do all of them except for corn. All the chaos gods except for corn. There's like Nurglite, there's Slaneshi, and there's Zinchian, which are all really cool to see represented. No cornate like blood letters or any of them, which I found a little funny. Maybe they'll show up later. I recall in Space Marine, I think all of the demons there were cornate, because again they were like trying to, that was a game that was also kind of trying to hit a more mainstream audience, and they weren't trying to show you the weird shit like the plague toads and stuff like that. But no, I like I like the demon representation. I like the way that they are. I like the way that they've been represented in the game, like through gameplay. So, okay, what do you Nurgle, the plague, plague and pestilence? What are his, demons? Oh, it's like the plague toads, who are really high in health, and they spit acid that lingers on the ground. And they leap around, and there's like a great plague toad that's kind of like a boss type enemy. And it'll leap around, shoot a bunch of acid, has this big tongue attack, and you really gotta. It has some interesting like unique patterns basically, and then you have the pink and blue horrors. So pink horrors, they shoot not like the most like aggressive demons, but they shoot these homing projectiles at you, and then when you kill them, they split into blue horrors. Oh yeah, obviously it's like what they do. They split into blue horrors, and then you kill the blue horrors, and they have little flames. They leave little flames on the ground, which I think do damage. Not sure, but if you want to play a little risk-reward game, you can use the chainsword, which is the chainsword's interesting in this game. It feels definitely inspired by the Doom Eternal chainsaw, but basically the way that it works is that it has its own dedicated button. It's V by default on the keyboard. You hit it, and basically whatever enemy you're looking at, you'll kind of rush towards them pretty far too. And if you reach them, you'll dig the chainsword into them, and they'll basically be stun locked, and you can just mash the button, and you'll just claw through their health bar. And I don't know if there's other enemies who have this kind of interaction, but if you completely go through the pink horror, where you like you basically get like an overkill on it, where you mash until it's literally like it jibs, and not just until the health reaches 0, because there is a difference. You can like totally destroy the body essentially. It will not split apart into the blue horrors, or it at least has a smaller, very small chance to, than whereas if you just like shot it, it's basically guaranteed. So like that's actually cool, and the risk then comes from the fact that the chainsword, while you're doing it, you're still vulnerable. It's not a glory kill or like the chainsaw from Doom. You are vulnerable during it, and it's just and you do get armor back from it. You get a little bit of armor from using it. So they like to throw in a couple pink horrors in the hordes of enemies, and it kind of creates this, this decision-making process where, okay, I can kill that, I can kill the pink horror pretty easily. They're not like the toughest enemies. You just focus fire them for like a second and a half, and they'll go down. But it'll create these lower priority enemies that are still gonna like, swarm me and come after me. Or I can just, overkill them with the chainsword, guarantee that they're not going to split apart, but I'm going to be vulnerable during it. So maybe you can find you can find an opening, you can find an opportunity where maybe you can isolate it, from other enemies. Maybe you save them for last. Maybe you don't even do it at all, and you decide like, nah, I'm just gonna like mow it down with my gun and then deal with the blue horrors later. I've made the decision that I can deal with them. I'm okay with dealing with them separately. And that's like a fun decision. That's like a fun strategic decision to make in combat. Yeah, and then there's obviously Chaos Space Marines, all Black Legion, because this is just going for very like poster child poster child representation. You're not gonna get any kind of like, I don't know, word bearers or anything like that, or Iron Warriors. I'd love to see Iron Warriors in a game like this. That'd be cool. For the Chaos Space Marines. No, it's all Black Legion. Just, the generic, we have to show a Chaos Space Marine. It's Black Legion. Yeah. There's like the regulars. Yeah, and there's like some cool, there's some cool enemy designs. So there's like the regular Chaos Space Marine who shoots like a bolter at you, and then he can throw a grenade. There's the Terminators who are like super heavy, and they have basically the heavy bolters. I think they also might throw grenades, I forget. But there's a really cool enemy in the Chaos Chosen. Or sorry, no, the Aspiring, the Chaos Space Marine. There's like a version of them. It's an Aspiring Champion, which is just like a melee guy. And if you kill him, it's similar to the Pink Horror, where if you kill him with just like gunfire, there is, I want to say it feels like a 50-50 chance that he'll completely revive as a Chaos Chosen. And then that is like a stronger version of the enemy. If you kill him, I think if you do the same like overkill thing with the chainsword, I think it's like a much lower chance, if not guaranteed, that he won't come back. But like, oh, that's a cool bit of like flavor. That's like a fun enemy design that is also flavorful. Because like, oh, it's an aspiring champion, and then he dies in battle and gets blessed from beyond the grave by the chaos gods and comes back as a chosen. So like that's cool. I've said it many times before, but you can make really cool. 40K has so much potential for games because you can just take any genre and then have just like a solid foundation of that genre, and then just layer on top of that 40K flavored things. Because there's so much, it's almost like too easy. Because there's all this lore to draw from. There's a literal game with like, tabletop game with units that have specific like iconic kind of play styles and gameplay mechanics and gameplay identities to draw on, that translate really easily into a lot of different genres. And then you make a cool game. There's so much potential to just make cool 40K games just with that formula. Yeah. So I haven't finished it yet, but enjoying it a lot. Really solid game, and I'm looking forward to finishing it. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Good game. So after that, the day after I streamed that, Kat came over, and we went to Fanime. I guess I could quickly. I don't actually have a ton to say about the convention. Most of the convention itself, like, not a lot of like stories that are really like, worth telling on the podcast, I guess. It was a lot of like walking around and looking at stuff and taking some pictures sometimes, and maybe meeting some friends of hers. She had a lot of friends who were going to this. And yeah, it was just kind of that for like 4 days. I will say we got there way too early on Friday. So it was a Friday to Monday event. and we got there way too early on Friday. She was very, she was really like, we have to get there like early. We have to beat the line. We have to get there early on Friday. So we get there, 30 minutes after it opens, right? We wait like another 30 minutes in line. It's like 10 a.m. We get in, nothing's open. Nothing's there. None of like the artist alley, the dealer's hall didn't open until like 2 p.m. So we're like, there's like no panels that we really care to go to. She didn't have like any friends who were there that day specifically or at the time, or like the schedule didn't line up. So we were just like, what do we do? what do we do today? So yeah, walking around the convention, the San Jose, what is it? Is it McHenry? The convention center, down there, and yeah, slightly boring. And we were like, maybe we shouldn't have come so early. But it was fine. I mean, like, one of the things that I've realized is that, I'm an introverted person. I don't being around like big crowds can kind of just drain me of a lot of my energy. And I think if I was going to go to a convention, I was thinking about going, like, what if I went to this alone for 4 days? I probably wouldn't have had a very good time. I probably would have just been very, like, bored and tired. Just going as like a regular person, civilian. I think at this point, conventions, there was a point probably when I was in high school where I could have just gone to a convention. I didn't do this. I always went with friends, but there was a point where I probably could have gone on my own and had a good time. Now I think I'd probably have to go with someone else. So luckily I was with Kat, and she always kind of makes it a lot better. And I love being with her. So it was like, at worst it was like a little boring. But at best it was pretty fun. There was, Kat cosplayed every day, 4 days. She had 4 different outfits. It was a lot. It was a lot of work on her end. She put a lot of work into getting all this ready. Like, it was a lot of fun going on the second day. I think second day. I'm mixing them up. Yeah, second day. And she was Princess Peach. And there's a bunch of cosplay meetups at these things. So she went to a Smash Brothers cosplay meetup, and it was really fun. And I took a ridiculous amount of pictures, because they'll do like the group. What it is they'll do like a group photo and all that, but there's a little more like there's, at least for this, I've been to ones where it's like just kind of people meet up and hanging out. Like I went to a JoJo cosplay meetup at a different con a few years ago, and it was just people meeting up and hanging out and talking about JoJo, which was cool in its own way. This was at Fanime, it seemed like there was a little more organization with like, oh, we're gonna take different kinds of different themes, right? So they started off with like a group photo, and then it was like what were some of the themes they did? They would do like, sword fighter characters versus characters with guns, or they would do blue characters versus red characters. All the people as Mario and all that. And it was legit really fun, and just kind of a fun hangout thing. It was really funny because we got to the spot that was designated where the meetup was happening on the schedule, and all of a sudden, just by complete coincidence, there was like 4 Peach cosplayers all next to each other, just like not grouped up, like we were waiting for, there was like a Genshin meetup right before us. All of a sudden, randomly, there's like 4 Peaches, one of them being Kat, and all of them just like saw each other at the same time. It's just like, and I saw them from like, I stood a little bit away so that I could get some pictures. Some like, you know, because I was taking pictures for her. But I could just see them, like all the peaches were just like talking, like they're all coming gal pals, which was very funny. It was cute. Yeah, I don't know, very just like fun, just like all around fun time. You get to see, it's always like really cute when you get to see like a kid who's there, and everyone like everyone like claps for them or something, like everyone's bigging up the kid. um yeah, very sweet, very nice. I was expecting to just be like, oh, I'm just gonna watch, you know, I'm gonna take some pictures of Cat and and just kind of be a spectator to this thing, but actually I ended up really liking just watching it. um and there was some fun. There was one, it was like the idea was Kirby. There was like two people as Kirby, and the idea was like Kirby inhaling other fighters. So it was like a voluntary one if you wanted to come up, and they put together, it was like Kirby, all the both Kirby's on one side, they were both like or just like, you know, stretching their arms out like they were doing the inhale move, and then everyone else like posed as if they were getting pulled in, and they're like all, you know, freeze framed on the like, oh, I'm getting sucked in. It was really fun. That stuff was cool. They had a very large section just for, it was like the gaming hall, which there was a big gaming component to this convention that I was not aware of. I literally did not look at the schedule until we got there. I knew nothing that was happening. But there was a big gaming component to this convention. There was I don't feel like walking over to my backpack to dig out the schedule, but it was a really big area that was its own hall that had there was one section where they had a bunch of PCs set up. It was kind of like a almost like a PC bong, like a gaming cafe sort of setup, like is popular in countries like Korea and stuff like that. Where they had like a couple different games loaded up. You could play League of Legends. You could pay $80 for a 4-day ticket to go to a convention and play League of Legends. They had like a bunch of consoles set up with like a few games. I saw Tekken and Strive. I was really considering taking my hitbox, and I was like, it's just too goddamn heavy to lug around all day. Or something, and then they had a bunch of retro game setups. Kat played a bit of Mega Man 8, which is her favorite Mega Man, which I don't necessarily agree with, but I respect it a lot. She played a little Mega Man 8. They had a big arcade section where there was a Third Strike machine that I was eyeing the whole time, but of course it was the most populated one. So we ended up playing a little bit of Soul Calibur 2. We played a little bit of Garo, which they also had. That was cool. We did play Third Strike one time. We asked like, hey, can we both just like get one or two games in, please? And the people sitting there were nice enough to let us take some games. So that was cool. Oh, and then there's also a big like card and tabletop game area where like there was a Magic tournament that was going on. There was a table every day for like Dungeons and Dragons and Werewolf. And they had like a few tournaments too, like actually a number of tournaments. There was there was a League tournament, there was a Valorant one, there was a Mario Kart one, there was a CVS2 tournament. I was like, what? And it wasn't a very big one. I wouldn't have expected that many people to enter it, but like, yeah, they had a Capcom vs SNK2 tournament, which I was like, that's fucking cool. I wish that I had seen that on the schedule. Before I got there. That would have been neat. Yeah. Like cool setup. I've never been to Fanimecon before. Kat has been twice for like a day and like a half day before. Like not this was the longest that she'd been there ever. So I kind of asked her like, what is it? How does this one stack up compared to the other ones? And she said that in previous years the dealer's hall had a lot more variety to it. So I went there and I'm used to like going to conventions and you go to the dealer's hall or the artist alley, or sometimes they're combined. Here they were separate, but sometimes it's the same thing. The place you go to buy stuff, and it's a lot of like, okay, there's a couple real companies there. Selling like their merchandise and all that, posters, artwork, and merchandise, memorabilia, all that kind of thing. And then you have like the independent artists who have booths there. And I'm used to that, and that was what this was. But apparently she told me that in previous years there was a lot of variety with like finding like old toys and action figures and a lot of retro stuff that was sounded, I don't know if it would have been specifically interesting to me, but it would have been more interesting, I guess, just to differentiate it from other conventions. She said that, like, because we went to Crunchyroll together, 2022 together, and she said that the one this year, the dealer's hall and the places you buy stuff at Fanime this year were a lot more like Crunchyroll than they were previous Fanimes, which I thought was interesting. Not a lot of like retro, like actual, retro stuff like old DVDs or VHSs and that. Not a lot of like collectors stuff in that kind of a sense. But walking around finding merch. She bought 2 different Spy Family plushes. She got one of Lloyd, and then she got one of Anya, where Anya's holding a little bag of peanuts. Very cute. She was very happy to get that. And then, oh god, I almost don't even want to spoil it. I'm working on a video right now that I wish I was able to get out before the end of the month, but things happened and I wasn't able to. I'll maybe talk about it later. It's probably going to be like in the very soon, but not before the end of the month probably, unfortunately. But I bought a thing that is directly related to the video I'm working on, and I did not think I would find it, and I almost wish we were recording this experience of looking for this thing, because on a complete whim I was like, you think they would have something related to this? And then we found a booth that might have sold that, and I asked them, and they found it for me, and I was losing my shit, and I spent $70 on it on an impulse purchase, because I would I would jump in front of a train for a bit, I don't regret it in the slightest, and I can't say what it is. I will probably, it's too late to work it in. I'm already into the editing process. It's too late to work it into the video, in a way that I think like fits naturally. I will probably make a second channel video about it because it's funny. Yeah, so I guess be on the lookout for that. Anything else about Fanime? I feel like there was something else. Anything else I really wanted to talk about? I don't know. I mean, it was a convention. It was a decently large anime convention that we were at for 4 days. Maybe, I think one of the things we learned was that maybe going early was like not the best idea. I think the days where we got there a little closer to noon, we had a little more fun, where we were only there for maybe 5 hours as opposed to like 8, which makes a lot of difference. Part of it was also that we didn't go to any panels. There were a few panels that I wanted to go. There was like 2 panels that I wanted to go to. but like we didn't end up going to those. They were really late, and we had to catch the train, and like weekend schedule. Last train gets out a little, a little inconvenient time. So we missed those. And like I noticed this also with like going to Crunchyroll. I think I mentioned this when I talked about that con experience, that I remember in high school going to panels at like CRX, Crunchyroll Expo, and having a lot of fun. And then the last like two were like, I don't care about really any of these. Like, I didn't care about any of the guests, really. Right? I cared about almost none of the guests. This was also had that problem where, like I remember the first, like, couple Crunchyrolls I went to, they had, like, some good guests. They had, like, a lot of YouTubers that I liked, that had, like, genuinely really funny panels. They were like fun to watch. They had some like industry people I was familiar with, and it was like fun. I don't know, fun. I think it's really just the strength of the guests for me. A lot of it's a twofold thing, and I mentioned this during the Crunchyroll episode when I talked about that. Part of what hurts it for me is that I just don't watch I just don't watch anime anymore. I just don't. I don't watch things in general. I'm not a watcher, you know. I'm not much of a watcher. And, Kat showed me Spy Family. I liked it a lot. I'm not watching anime. And that's nothing against it. Look, there's very few things that I will go out of my way to watch. And one of them is Fast and the Furious. One of them is Fast and Furious movies, but anime is generally not. I even need to catch up on JoJo. I didn't even finish part 6. Well, that was for other. That's a different topic. That had more to do with the release schedule of how that show came out. Yeah. So not being like super into anime anymore. Slightly. It made it less of like I remember taking a friend to like his first anime convention a couple years ago, and I remember being a little worried that he would maybe be bored or something like that, or maybe like he wouldn't. I don't know. I was just worried about his experience. I was being a worrywart, and I had nothing to worry about because he was just like in awe. He just had this starry look in his eye of like he's finally like in the place. He's in the place, where you don't have to like explain yourself, kind of thing. I'm not really at that point where I'm like in I can just be there and be having a good time because it's such a novel experience. I've been going to conventions for a few years now, so I kind of get it now. Yeah, man, there's like a thing, I guess I'll talk about this. Something I noticed that like really was in the forefront of my mind, actually not like all the time, but just like kept popping up in my brain, is there's like a lot of porn here. There's a lot of porn, right? And I'm not opposed to pornography, I love pornography. But like it gets to a point where, we're walking around and we see like some really insane shit. And in my brain, the first thing I think of is I just saw like a parent with their child. There's like a 7-year-old child walking around, and like it's a little weird. It's a little weird, dude. And like, is that on the vendors? I don't know. Like, I don't know who that's on. I think it's fine. Like, okay, I went to like a smaller anime convention a couple years in a row with my friends. That was at like a local community college, and it was really nice. And when you go there, the demographic is like around, our like high school and above. right? And funny enough, I don't think at that one there was that much like crazy, you know, borderline NSF, even like borderline NSFW stuff there. That's where one of those like, okay, you know, most of the it's gonna be like high schoolers at the youngest kind of thing, like we were. But you know, it's like a big convention, and there's gonna be families and people with kids, and I just think it's a little weird to have like porn in all but nipple just out there. Just weird. There's like a hyper one thing that I find a little obnoxious about the anime community, which I have distanced myself greatly from since I was in high school, is the real like hypersexuality, like hyper pornography obsession that it has, that I just find a little, at best obnoxious and at worst kind of off-putting and sad. Sad in the sense that I used to be like that because I was a sexually frustrated high schooler who would go 6 months without like touching another human being. So like I get what that's like, and I'm like, I just see people walking around with like the Ahegao hoodie, and I'm like, oh man, like, are you doing all right? it's like when you see Wine Mom merch, and you're like, oh, that's cute. Do you have like a problem? In the back of your mind, you're like, that's cute. You might have a, you know, how many interventions have you had? It's that kind of thing. The Wine Mom of anime merch. The Wine Moms of anime. What the fuck? What's the podcast title of this gonna be? Ahegao Wine Mom merch. Oh, that sounds too bad. I'm brainstorming right now. There's something there. I'll come up with something. I gotta write that down in my notes. Come up with pun with Wine Mom. There we go. I just find it a little obnoxious and like just a little off-putting, you know. There's like that, you know, that meme. There's like a meme of Patchy the pirate from SpongeBob, and he goes, that's it. That was the meme. That was just a porn addiction. That's just your porn addiction or something. A lot of anime. Oh god, there's so much, dude. Oh my god, there was like a panel or something or some sort of event that was like it was like an 18 plus event, and it was like otaku comedy stand up, and I was like, dude, is that on film? Because that would have to be like like lethal cringe. Have you seen anime memes? They're fucking awful. Hey guys, what the fuck, am I getting a call right now? I'll ignore that for now and say that I didn't see it, and then I'll call them back because I'm a devious little scamp. Anyway, hey guys, what if I was somewhere and what if you fucked your sister? Hey, what if you were at school and you had a teacher who was a woman, and she said ara ara. Fuck. You guys, hey guys, when you're at the store, anime girl. You guys can laugh now. It's cool. It's all right to laugh. Oh my god, I don't think I could ever do that to myself of actually watching that. Um. Uh. Uh. Yeah, and it's funny because like there's like an archetype, you know. There's an archetype of the like milady anime guy who like you know exactly what he looks like. It's like a pale white guy with like a just it's less like he has a hairstyle and more just like he didn't cut his hair, which technically is me, but like we're in the fedora and like for some reason they've always got like a dinner jacket or something like that on with like an anime porn shirt underneath and like jeans and you're like it's that kind of guy. And when you go to these things, you know, you see people of all different shapes and sizes and sorts. But you will see that guy. You will see several of him. And I did too. And it's funny because when you actually talk to any of these people, they're pretty nice. Like it's funny because all the people, for as obnoxious as I find a lot of the, I guess this is more the online anime community. Every time I talk to people, they were pretty nice. Like anyone I asked for pictures, I got some cool pictures with people. There's this dude. I always see him at Crunchyroll Expo, and he always shows up in these awesome Mega Man cosplays where I guess he must make them out of like cardboard, but it's like a full body suit with like a big helmet that looks almost like a polygonal Mega Man X head. He's usually like a Mega Man X or some like armor variant, like one of X's armors. I've seen this dude every year, except for, you know, years where everything got shut down, recently. But basically every year for 7 or 8 years, since like 2016, the first time I went to, or 2017, I think was the first time I went to, 2016, first time I went to Crunchyroll Expo. Was it? I actually don't remember. I think it was 2017 was the first one they did. I was at the very first one that ever happened. But I've seen this dude like every year for like 7 years, and I always get a picture with him because it's awesome. And he has like a buster that has like LEDs in it, so it like lights up and all that. And I take a picture with him, and he always does the same pose of like pointing the buster at the camera, and I do the same pose with pointing my fist at the camera, like I have a little buster. It's great. It's almost like I've never spoken to this guy. Like I don't know what he looks like underneath it. He's just this dude who's there every year at a convention in these really cool looking Mega Man cosplays, and I always get a picture with him. And like that's the cool stuff. That's the fun stuff. Or seeing someone in like an obscure character that you recognize. Kat had this friend who was there. She knows them from college, and her friend was there with a friend of their own, who was going as Dio, but specifically one of Dio's alternate color palettes from the 97 Heritage for the Future fighting game. Because I saw them, because there was a JoJo cosplay meetup, and that we checked out, and I saw them down there. I didn't realize it was the friend of the friend. But I was like, that's like a very specific. Oh, that's from Heritage for the Future. And we met up later, and I was like, "You're the alternate color from Heritage for the Future." She was like, "You're the only person who knew what this was from specifically." I was like, "Yes, this is like the perfect intersection of my interests." You did this cosplay for me, kind of thing. And all that was cool. Like, meeting people and interacting with people was all, for the most part, very pleasant. You will get a lot of interactions that are very awkward. And you just kind of gotta like be like, okay, what? You just kind of gotta roll with it. Where it's not awkward and like someone's being creepy or weird. It's just they don't know how to talk. They just don't know how to talk to a stranger, but they want to. Because they recognize, like, usually it was like, you know, Kat, because she was in cosplay, so it's usually she would be like, oh, like she was in Ramona Flowers Day 3, I think, and she would get Ramona, and people would just be kind of awkward, but you just kind of got to roll with it, and it's always nice. It's always nice. She got a lot of compliments, a lot of pictures and stuff. Excuse me. She got a lot of pictures as Peach. She got a lot. It was really cute. Oh, it was adorable. When we were first walking into the convention center, there's like a big courtyard outside, basically like the front area, and there's like a mom there, and she had two like little girl, like maybe 4 or 5, who were also dressed as Peach, and they both wanted pictures with Cat. It was really cute. It was so cute. Yeah. The people are usually more interesting than the convention itself, if that makes sense. The people are pretty cool a lot of the time. Like, you just have like some fun interactions and chit chat with people. Yeah. Conventions are cool. They're cool because it's like, it's a social thing. It's like a hangout thing. I think that's like really a lot of the strength of them for me now at this point is like going with friends and hanging out, and maybe having some spontaneous interactions with strangers. That kind of stuff is the fun part of it for me. I think that's all I have to say about Fanimecon. Overall, pretty good experience. We had a good time. Very tiring. Very tired. Took a long nap. Yeah, so I kind of, and then I really, the last thing that I had to talk about, and this is a big topic. So last episode, the live episode, we talked about, or I mentioned how I had seen, we're putting the Nickelodeon marathon on another hold to watch another trilogy, sort of, which is, it was before, it was the last one was the Before trilogy, and this one is the now we're watching Guardians of the Galaxy. So we actually ended up watching all of it while Kat was over at my place. Well, we watched all 3 movies and the holiday special in the release order. So to quickly recap my thoughts on Guardians 1, just because I think it's important for the comparison. I thought it was a pretty solid movie. Some like good humor, good action for the most part. I liked the character. The characters were the big hang up for me in the first film. And it wasn't really the characters themselves, it was the way that they developed and the way that their relationships developed. It felt very rushed. It felt very like it was weird. It was like, it's this disparate group of misfits, right? They're all coming together to save the day. That's the idea. And there's like a weird point in the movie. It's like after they go to prison, where they just kind of like stay together and like link up and form a friendship for some reason. Really weird. I didn't. It felt like okay. It's like, they get to prison and Rocket immediately is like wants to be like basically a protect Quill. He wants to like protect him. I'm like, why? Why do you have any Rocket Raccoon specifically Rocket of all characters, who is known, like, one of his defining traits that's a big part of his character arc, this is gonna be a full spoiler thing, by the way, for all 3 movies and everything, is that he is extremely cynical and he has like horrible trust issues because of his backstory and stuff, which they get into in volume 3. Like, he would be the most standoff-ish. Like, genuinely, I think that the reason that he likes Groot, I actually like how they never really go into detail about how they met. They're just like a team. I'm glad that they never like expand on that. I think it's I'd rather just like they just show up. I genuinely, I think that like one of the reasons Groot was like the only person that, other being he really cared about or was friends with, is because Groot is like such a basic, almost like, I think Groot's kind of like Rocket. He's just kind of like a weird guy. He's just like a weird creature. Almost like he's a very simple creature, like Rocket. Does that make sense? Like Groot doesn't scheme. He's very like, I don't know, straightforward. He's almost naive in a sense. And it's almost like Rocket can like put his guard down around Groot, and he can trust him not to like fuck him over or work against him in some way. I also had a bit of like, I thought it would be, after we watched the first movie, I thought it would be really a really fun idea, which unfortunately is not what they end up going with. But so like Groot, all he says is "I am Groot," right? And the only person in the first movie who knows who basically translates Groot is Rocket. And I kind of I had this idea that like, what if Groot really doesn't actually like, isn't capable of like communicating his thoughts through speech, and when Rocket translates Groot's speech, it's just him saying what he wants Groot to be saying, if that makes sense. Like, what if Rocket uses Groot as like his conscience, or like a different kind of, because Rocket's so stubborn and he doesn't want to change, but he uses Groot as like almost like a sock puppet that can be his like the second voice in his head, because Groot's always the one who's like, making the more empathetic suggestions and things like that, at least in the first movie. I'm like, what if that's actually just like Rocket's like a different side of him that he doesn't want to display in his personality, so he just pretends that Groot is speaking a language, when in fact Groot really just means "I am Groot," and that's all he means. And there's like nothing, there's no actual language to it. And then unfortunately, no, that's not the case. He does, I guess, speak somehow and is able to communicate very complex thoughts in 3-word sentences, which is like a gag, I guess. But I don't know. I kind of wish my idea was more fun to me. That's, probably because I came up with it. Yeah, it was funny because it's like, I like the characters by the end of the movie and their relationship to each other. It was just like, I just didn't really buy the way that the movie got there. And then we watched the second movie. We watched Volume 2. And I looked over at Kat after it was over, and I was, we were talking about it, and I said, this feels like the movie, it feels like when James Gunn signed on to do these movies, this was the movie he wanted to make. It feels like this was the story he wanted to tell, and he had to get the first movie out of the way, which is why it almost feels like the first movie's plot has been like vacuum sealed and then shot through a pneumatic tube, and then it ends up in Volume 2, and it gets like, the seal gets broken open, and it all kind of like, it all just kind of expands. And it has a little, it relaxes a bit. I made a direct comparison last episode to The Suicide Squad, which was a very, very similar movie, also by James Gunn. It's a comic book adaptation of these misfit characters coming together to do a mission and save the day at the end, But that film, I thought, pretty similar runtime to the original Guardians. But I thought The Suicide Squad used its time much more elegantly and had a lot more interesting nuance in the characters' relationships. Like, I could think like Idris Elba's character. I was just like thinking, took a walk earlier. I was just thinking about like, I can pretty accurately, even though I saw the movie like 2 years ago, I can pretty accurately remember basically how he felt, the very specific ways that he felt about every single different character. Or some of them he looked at more as like colleagues, like on a job. You could tell like he thought about like the rat catcher girl as almost like a definitely like a stand-in for his daughter, sort of. That he feels kind of like a fatherly sort of protection for. Peacemaker, not peacekeeper. I was like, is it peacekeeper? Peacemaker is like they have like a rivalry thing going on, but he, for most of the movie, he like, it's kind of like a semi-respectful rivalry. Although you can actually, they don't really like each other. And like, yeah, and then and you see those grow. Like, he pities Polka Dot Man. He doesn't dislike him. He just like pities him. But you can see how all these characters' relationships change over the course of the movie in pretty believable ways. Like, that made a lot of sense. And in Guardians 1, it felt like they've been together for what feels like maybe 12 hours, and they're like, "You're my family." I'm like, what? What? Huh? How did we get here? It feels like when James Gunn wanted, like, when he signed on for these movies, which I believe was always like a 3-film deal. It was always a trilogy. He liked the idea of the comics, right? Of like these characters together, which I oh my god, 40K connection. We were in the credits for Volume 2. I had no idea this was based off of the 2008 or not, I think 2008 run of the Guardians of the Galaxy comic, which was written by Dan Abnett, who is one of the most well-known, beloved Black Library authors, which is the Warhammer publication. He's written, I own multiple Dan Abnett books on my shelf back there. I had no idea he wrote a Guardians of the Galaxy run that these characters were based off of. Yeah, very funny, but actually makes a lot of sense. He likes writing teams. He likes writing group stories. Right. I feel like James Gunn really liked the idea of these characters, but he wanted to tell stories with them already, like, formed and with their relationships established. So that's why the first movie feels so like they're just really just shoving the plot through. Second film has a way more, and I'll finally start talking about the second movie, way more time to breathe. And it's weird because, again, it's like a very similar runtime, but it feels so much more like the time is much better used. There's much less action in this film, but you never really, it doesn't really feel, it doesn't have to rely on the action because the character stuff is pretty engaging. So I should clarify. Going into this film, I already knew the twist, because of the meme, because of the what? I already knew that. So I went into this knowing that, right? And I got enough of a gist just from like via osmosis of what this movie was about that I was like, okay, I get the idea. Peter, reconnects with his dad. His dad is Ego, the living planet from the comics. And then everything's all awesome and happy and great, but then twist, and he's actually a bad guy. And I was sort of bracing myself to not like it or to be very frustrated with the film, because plots like this are very predictable. So, because there's like a little thing called like basic screenwriting, which is your story needs a conflict, and you're not going to go into this movie, and Peter and Ego's relationship is going to be awesome and super cool, and nothing bad ever happens, because the movie has to happen. There has to be a conflict somewhere. It's like literally the foundation of every story is some form of conflict. And so the most obvious one is, wait, this character wasn't actually super great. This kind of plot's been done a million times before, and I was really like, oh no, are they gonna just pretend? Are the characters just gonna be like none the wiser to like anything going on, or like not even be suspicious or something? And it's just gonna be me waiting for like, okay, when's the twist gonna happen? Which should just be a very exhausting movie watching experience, right? Thankfully, I was pleasantly surprised when they first meet Ego, and they're like, it's like their first real like run in, like a meeting with him, and they're like having by a little campfire. Ego leaves for something for a second, and then Gamora looks at Quill, and she's like, "Yeah, I don't trust this guy." Immediately, like she's very suspicious, and Peter's like, "Yeah, that's actually pretty reasonable. This is really weird. Let's play it by ear." And I'm like, "Okay, thank you. We're not gonna pretend, oh, what? He was a bad guy the whole time? Like we're not gonna do this." We're gonna have at least some of the characters are gonna have some reservations, right? And Peter does buy into Ego for a good chunk of the movie, but at least it makes sense. And it's like dramatically fitting. Like there is a period of time in the movie where he's questioning, like, what is this guy's deal? Is he really my father? Like, what are his, intentions? He has a lot of questions, right? Like, why did you leave my mom and all that? And he's not happy with the answer, right? He's not happy with the response, but it's like, okay, it's like a kind of complicated relationship, and they're playing it pretty straight. But like when you see that, so like there's an interesting thing done with Peter's his relationship to like father figures, where Yondu, introduced in the first movie, raised Peter, but he's weird. It's one of those, like, I don't know if you could necessarily call Yondu abusive, but it definitely kind of a rough upbringing. He's like they're like basically space pirates. There's many ways in which he exploited Peter for the purposes of space piracy. A lot of tough love, and you can tell that like Peter does have some complicated feelings about how Yondu raised him. And there's some stuff later in like the holiday special about like, there was a sense of love and fatherliness and a paternal sense of love between them, but it's more complicated than that. And Yondu was maybe not cut out to be a father. It just kind of happened to him, for reasons that you learn later in Volume 2, of why he kept Quill. Why he really kept Quill. And then now you have Ego, he's like, he made mistakes in the past, but he's kind of like almost the dream dad. And there's, they're having this conversation at the start of the film where Quill is like just kind of like venting a little bit about like he didn't even, the things that he knew people with like, let's say, normal fathers would do growing up, of literally any kind of bonding. And he uses specifically the example of like playing ball, playing catch, that he never got to do. It was just thieving and pirating. And Ego is showing Peter that like how to manipulate the life and the energy from the planet, and he forms a little ball and they play catch with each other. And it's genuinely a nice moment where you feel happy. You feel happy for Peter. You feel happy for him as a character, that he's getting the experience that he never got as a kid. And you see with that, okay, this is how he starts to buy into Ego. Is he actually feels like, wait, actually, maybe I can I can get a semblance of what I missed out on as a kid. Excuse me. This is a very Peter-centered story. It's a very Star-Lord-centered story, where the other characters don't. There's a few other plot lines, like Rocket and Drax don't do too much, but they get some decent moments. Um, Gamora and Nebula get some pretty good play. Um, they had a I like the dynamic between them. It's like these two adopted sisters of Thanos, who is a horrible, torturous piece of shit who made them fight. And then every time one of them won, and Gamora always won, he would replace pieces of Nebula's body with machinery to make her stronger until she's basically like 90% cyborg from what it looks like. And like really dark, kind of fucked up backstory. Nebula's hatred of Gamora, completely justified. 100%, I get it. And the there's a lot of family themes actually in this. There's a lot of decent family themes in this now that I think about it, because it's obviously the father-son relationship between Peter and Ego, but then you have Gamora and Nebula and their sisterly relationship. And I really liked the scene where Nebula tracks Gamora down, fucking tries to kill her in a spaceship, just shooting down at her. They end up having this crazy fight in a cave where Nebula like crashes a ship, and they have this like brutal fist fight, and then Nebula wins, and she doesn't even kill Gamora, and she just goes, I won. I won. That's all I wanted. I just wanted to beat you one time. I wanted to beat you. And she uses specifically, she best you in combat. Like, it's such a, I've bested you in combat. I've won, I think is like how she says it, which is such a, I don't know. I love the phrasing of that. Cause it's so almost cold. It's almost like cold and clinical a bit. Like, that could be like how Thanos spoke about it when they were children. Not like beat you in a fight. It's you have to, whoever bests the other in combat kind of thing. Like, that's how he would speak. I'm just reading into it, but I really liked that wording and all that, and that whole scene. And Gamora's like defending herself, where she's I just like, what the fuck did you want me to do? You know, someone had to lose, right? And I like that. I like how neither of them is necessarily in the wrong for how they feel. Like, one person had to lose. Really, Thanos was the villain there, but Nebula has this kind of built up frustration and resentment of Gamora, because Gamora never even like thought about relenting once. And it makes perfect sense from Gamora's point of view, because I don't want to be fucking have my eye ripped out and replaced with a robot eye. Like, what the hell? Some people would be into that, actually. Some people would want like a bunch of cyborg parts. Yeah, I don't know. There's like, it's like some, I don't know, a cool relationship. I like and then Nebula is just fucking, it's like some of the most emotional she gets in the whole series, where she's just saying that like she just wanted a sister. She just wanted this like horrible existence that she had to live out. She just wanted any kind of like sisterly bond, and Gamora never even thought. Gamora was completely focused on her own survival. And it's not something you can totally blame her for, but like, yeah, it still sucks. And I like that. I like that kind of it's a relationship that actually has a little bit of depth and some nuance in it. I like that a lot. Mantis comes in this movie. Mantis is introduced. So, one thing is that what I learned as we watched this and we watched the holiday special is that Mantis and Drax are my favorite characters. I love them, and every time they were on screen together, I was happy. They are like a wonderful comedy duo. I feel like you could write a whole sitcom just about them and their wacky misadventures, and I would watch it. We probably will not get that, but I would love it. um I really, so again, Drax doesn't get a ton of stuff to do in the movie besides his regular like hit stuff role. But there is a really good scene, like a genuinely really good scene where Mantis, because she is an empath, thus she can feel other people, she can touch people and experience their emotions. She can literally feel them. And also influence them as well. It's like kind of a two-way street. She can read and write information. And they're just kind of sitting out and watching the sunset. And Drax starts talking about his, it reminded him, it's like a lake. There's like a little lake. And he is reminiscing about taking his daughter out to the lake when she was little, before she was killed by, his whole family was killed by Thanos. And he's just reminiscing about it. And Mantis just kind of touches his hand or his shoulder or something. She like puts her hand on his shoulder in like a comforting sense, and she starts feeling his emotion, what he's feeling. And she just starts weeping uncontrollably, just sobbing. The pain and the sadness that he's experiencing is so crushing. It's so overwhelming for her. She can't even believe it. And Drax is just completely stone-faced. Like he is barely expressing. He has almost a smile. He has almost like a sad smile on his face, and he's kind of like just looking off. And under the surface, he's feeling all this stuff. It's great. It's a really great scene. James Gunn really feels like he really knows how to write a character. It would have been so easy to make Drax just a big dumb guy, and for a lot of the movies, that's basically what he is. Like, that's his role. But there's like a character underneath there. He has like a legitimate tragedy. He has a legitimate tragedy and a real emotions, real like complex emotions. I'm saying the word complex a lot in this bit, but real complex emotions, and he isn't just like dumb guy. All the time, 100% of the time. I like the angle that they kind of, they bring in more fully. They flesh it out more in the third film of like, Drax is like warrior guy, but also like he's a very like loving, kind-hearted person. He's like a funny, jovial. He's actually a really funny, jovial guy who like everyone loves to have around, and he's great with kids. He loves entertaining kids. He's like an awesome uncle or dad, right? Like he's that kind of a person. But he has this just horrible, brutish anger. This vengeful anger that's never really been quelled in him because of what happened to him. And I like that. I like that I can just talk about a character like that, a character like him in that kind of a way. I also love Mantis. I love her characterization in that the reason that they work so good as a team is that they have weird social skills. Like, they have them, but they're weird. Drax is like famous, like part of the bit of his character is that he doesn't get like analogy or metaphor, or he really struggles. Like, his culture doesn't really have those concepts. So things like sarcasm or metaphors or analogies don't really like, they don't really register with him. They don't really come naturally. I like how you can tell throughout the films that he actually starts to understand those concepts. Like, he's not a complete idiot who's just gonna be dumb forever. He starts to understand in like the third film like what an analogy is. Like he doesn't have it all the way, but he's got it. He's getting there. But he's like very literal. That's his thing. He's an extremely literal kind of person. And Mantis is almost just like, she's very like sweet and helpful, because that's kind of just been her role. She's just basically Evo. She's Ego's helper, his like servant who helps him sleep at night. So she just kind of has like, she's like a homeschooled kid. She's like a really nice homeschooled kid where she's just like kind of inexperienced socially. She's not used to talking to other people. She has a slightly stilted way of communicating in her inflection. I like how she almost has like an accent, kind of. And a particular way of speaking. She won't really use a lot of shortenings of words. She'll put a lot of emphasis on different like interesting parts of a sentence, I guess. And then they're kind of almost like the perfect match, right? Because Mantis might not fully understand a lot of like social cues or things about the world, and Drax is like the most literal guy ever. He's the most literal dude ever. So they're able to communicate like just wonderfully, and they can kind of speak on the same terms. Funny enough, they can they're on like the same page in a weird way. Mantis is definitely more like rational, I guess. She's a little smarter. She's definitely smarter than him, but she doesn't have like the almost like street smarts, if that makes sense. I just really enjoy their dynamic. It's a lot of fun. I still don't totally buy Peter and Gamora's relationship. It felt very rushed and kind of out of nowhere in the first movie. I got it a little more in this one. There's some actual nice romantic moments, like when they do a little dance, and they have a little slow dance, and I mean, that scene ends with them having a fight, but you know, still, like, oh, I can kind of see it a little bit. Yeah, and then I don't know, the end of the movie is pretty fun. I thought the Yondu stuff was really strong, because it's like, okay, Peter kind of recognizing, you know, he's definitely spent a lot of his life being resentful of Yondu for many things. And now that he's been with Ego, and Ego's actually a fucking crazy person who wants to like absorb the entire universe into like his biomass. Once he sees that, you know, Yondu doesn't look too bad. But like he really does. You can tell that like he actually starts to appreciate Yondu a little bit. Like Yondu did care about Quill in a way that Ego never really did. Ego just looked at Quill as basically a puppet and literally an energy source, at best a successor to, you know, his power. Ego never really looked at any of his children like, you know, with any real love. They were just tools to him. And for as much as, you know, Quill was under the impression that Yondu thought of him in sort of a similar way, there is more to it than that. And he gets that more. You find out later that, like, I really liked the Yondu stuff in this movie. You find out, like, there's a scene at the start where Yondu's Ravager, what are they called? Team? His, like, ship, you know, his crew. They're on some kind of like snowy, cold planet area at like a bar, just hanging out, and he sees he runs into another Ravager who's like, hey, he's the it's Sylvester Stallone, and Sylvester Stallone plays basically like a big dog Ravager leader. And they have like this exchange where you're like, oh, is there like Yondu's got some history. He's got some history to him, where it's implied that he's kind of been exiled or excommunicated from the rest of the Ravager community because he kept Quill, right? They were apparently it's considered poor form to recruit children into the pirate gangs, right? They have like an honor code. And so Yondu taking in Quill basically made all the other Ravager crews turn their back on him, and they were like, that's really uncool for you to do, dude. And so you're like, oh, so Yondu seems like he gave up a lot just for, quote unquote, a kid who was, small and could get into small places that were good for thieving. That's like the line that they say a couple times, which you can tell because of the way they repeat it. This is what Yondu told Quill growing up, because Quill says it's how he explains it to Ego. He says, like, I was skinny and could fit in small places, good for thieving. I think it's like literally the line, and they say it like 2 or 3 times in the movie. It seems like he gave up a lot for just that. Like his entire community, basically, besides his immediate crew. And then you learn later that, oh wait, no, the reason that Yondu took in Quill was because he found out that Ego was killing all of his children, and because they didn't have the right compatibility with his energy, basically. They weren't compatible. So he Yondu was the one who would Ego hired to take all the children. You find out, oh wait, he found out at some point, he was like, and he could not stand the idea of sending this kid off to die. So he basically adopted him, which is a really nice, noble twist on a character who has otherwise been built up to be kind of an asshole in a lot of ways. You can, I really like the way that they took, Gunn took Yondu, and again, like, gave him some interesting layers to just, I don't know, flesh him out a little bit more, and not like super overt, like overly explained, or really not really blatant stuff, but you can tell, like, oh, okay, this is a character who in many ways is dishonorable, but there's noble elements to him that he doesn't like to maybe put on display. A lot of problems, and he wasn't the best father and all that, or father figure and all that, but at the end of the day, he did care about Quill without even really knowing him, you can assume, right? Like, just this kid he picked up, that he just on principle couldn't stand to send this kid off to die. So when Yondu dies at the end of the movie, he was like, damn, that's actually a genuinely pretty impactful character death. The way they did it was like very, very nice. I don't know. It felt, what do I say? Is respectful a dumb word to use in this situation? But like, yeah, it was like, oh, this is a nice send off for this character, and there's almost like a little bit of regret with Peter, right? Where he there's a little bit of regret with Peter, where he it's like he regrets not appreciating Yondu sooner and not having the perspective, but at least he got like the one day where he found all this out, basically. Oh, actually, no, there is a little bit of stuff for Rocket to do in this. Rocket is technically the reason they're in this mess, because Rocket stole some batteries from the race of the Sovereigns, which I love the fact that they were called they would sometimes refer to them as sovereign citizens. Very funny. The Sovereigns, he stole some like valuable energy batteries from them. Kind of basically kicks off the plot, and everyone's pissed off at Rocket because he got them into this big mess, and that ends up being how they meet Ego. But there's a little bit of like a redemptory thing. It's kind of setting up a little bit for the Volume 3, which is very Rocket centered, which is, hey, Rocket is like this character who really almost seems to go out of his way to piss people off and push them away. What the fuck is your problem, dude? Like, why would you do that? Why do you just fuck things up randomly for seemingly no reason? And it's funny because, oh yeah, there's a good scene with Yondu where Yondu directly confronts Rocket about that. And when Rocket, and he says like, I think, they have Yondu basically just psychoanalyzes Rocket, and he basically comes to the conclusion that they have a very similar complex where they're assholes because they're horribly damaged people. And they're scared of having real relationships with other people. And then when Rocket sees the way that other people feel about Yondu, and that ultimately in the end there is like love and care and appreciation there, it kind of is like, it moves the needle a little bit for him, and he realizes that like, like these people want to like me. These people want to like me, and it's not a ton, it's not a huge massive shift in the character, but you can see the idea planted there. Yeah, I enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed Volume 2 definitely a lot more than the first one. Yeah, I mean, it was, I think it's really funny how at the end of the movie, so during the movie, Quill's Walkman gets crushed. Oh my god, what the fuck? And then Kraglin, the character who I assumed was just kind of gonna be a background dude, like very minor character, I was very surprised that he ended up becoming a main character. Excuse me. But I liked it, and I was surprised in a good way. Because he is not particularly marketable, which I liked. He's just like a hick with fucked up looking teeth. He's just kind of a guy. I thought it was neat that he became like a mainstay cast member. But he says like, hey, I heard that you got like he picks up at some point, I forget what the exact explanation is, but basically he finds Peter a replacement for his Sony Walkman, and it's a Zune. And I thought that was really funny. I thought that was, I got a kick out of that. And hey, it's got like 3,000 songs on it or whatever, and that becomes Peter's listening new music device. So I really liked that. The movie, I mean, I liked the movie in general. I thought it had a nice, a pretty satisfying like emotional core. I think I enjoyed the stuff with all the different characters. I think that the time was much better used than the first movie. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm just a fan of the way that Gunn chose to develop out the characters, to reveal more about them. there's a little bit of that, like, there's a little bit of that Joss Whedon-y kind of like, we have to tell a joke at the end of the serious scene kind of thing. It's a little bit, it's not terrible, but there's a little bit of like, it kind of hurts the mood a little bit. It strikes you as me as a little bit like, not, like, it's not confident enough in the material. That like, oh, we have to add a joke in here to keep the audience engaged because, oh, is the drama not engaging enough? Little bit of that, just a tiny bit. But I liked it a lot. I think it was, I very much enjoyed it. Then we watched the holiday special, and it is my second. Okay, so here's a spoiler. My favorite, or sorry, my personal ranking of these movies is in reverse order from how they were released. Because Volume 3 was my favorite, and the holiday special is my second favorite. So what is the Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special? Well, it's like a 40-minute short, which is clearly, sending up the Star Wars Holiday Special, although it is not nearly as bad and has basically nothing to do with that movie, or it isn't really a parody. It's just kind of like a reference, like a sci-fi holiday special, Christmas special, and then the name, I guess. But really, it's not a weird clip variety show that's really boring like the Star Wars Holiday Special. No, it's actually great. The idea is that the Guardians go back to nowhere from the first movie, and they have decided to start. They're basically going to build up this little community, and this is like their little community that they've taken charge of, and they're going to develop it out and turn it into like a habitable. I think it was like basically a mining, almost slave colony in the first film, and now they're going to turn it into an actual society and civilization, a nice place for people to live, which is cool. It's a cool idea. I love the idea of this society that's built into a dead god's skull, which is fucking really cool. And how all of the materials are technically like the bones and the fluids and the, matter, like organic matter that's just, been like hardened and crystallized and all that. Like that's is really cool idea. So it's basically, does that take place after? So this is only aired on Disney Plus, but like you can find it. I mean, let's just say that we weren't. Oh yeah. So one thing about the way we watched these movies, everything from 2 onwards was, Kat forgot, or she didn't have enough space to pack her laptop, so we had to watch it on my computer. The problem is my speakers for my monitor are very quiet. Or we couldn't find a legal, very extremely super legal website to watch it on that had the sound quality. Actually, no, we went to Disney Plus and it was too quiet. It was too quiet. So what we ended up doing was, also it was the Disney Plus was in weirdly bad quality. Like it was like 720p maybe. Really weird. So we found a perfectly legal website to watch it on. Disney Plus Plus. It's the secret one they don't tell you about. It's Disney Minus, I should say. That would be the funnier name. And then we watched it with plugging my earbuds in and then sharing them between us. So I was the right channel and she was the left channel, which actually was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. It worked out decently fine. So it was only on, it's like a 40-minute special on Disney Plus, And it's basically, the idea is, I think it takes place after Infinity War and all that, where I totally forgot, because I saw Infinity War and Endgame so long ago, that Gamora got fucking yoinked. She got yoinky sploinkied in Infinity War, and then she got brought back in Endgame, except it wasn't like the regular, it wasn't actually, it was like Gamora from the past. It was a past version of Gamora before she got thrown off a cliff, who has none of the memories or experiences of the Gamora that you know from these movies. So basically all the relationship that she has with them doesn't exist, and Peter's not taking it very well. He's not taking it well. He's very sad. He's out of it, and he's just kind of just kind of going through the rigmarole of the daily tasks and all that. And Mantis and Drax are talking about how how they feel really bad for him, and how they heard Kraglin told them what Christmas was. Basically, I was like, when Peter first got adopted/abducted by Yondu, he tried to introduce the concept of Christmas to Kraglin, who was it was like, I think maybe just a few years older than him. Like, I think a teenager when Peter was like 8 or something like that. And he tried to do like a Christmas thing. And Yondu was like not having it. And they felt bad for him that he never really got to have like a real Christmas ever since he left Earth. And they have the idea to throw Peter a surprise Christmas party. And what would be the best gift for him? Oh, what about that actor he's talking about? He talks about Kevin Bacon all the time. Like how he loves Kevin Bacon movies. Let's get him Kevin Bacon. So they go to Earth and kidnap Kevin Bacon, the actor, who I believe like he and James Gunn are like probably friends or something like that, because there's this whole, it's great. So the reason that I love this so much is that it's, when I said that I would love like a series of Mantis and Drax having funny misadventures, this is like an episode of that. This is just the Christmas episode of that, of the Mantis and Drax show, and it is delightful. They are really funny watching them go to Earth and like on like Christmas Eve and walking around Hollywood looking for Kevin Bacon, and like going in and getting drunk. And I realized this today. Weird side note. Guardians of the Galaxy 1 and the Suicide Squad both have a scene where the characters go to a bar/a club and they get drunk together as part of their like bonding experience. Very weird. They both have a scene like that around like the midpoint of the movie. Maybe that's just like a type of thing that James Gunn likes doing. Maybe he just reused it. Again, the Suicide Squad feels like James Gunn taking another crack at the first Guardians movie. But anyway. It's them going to Kevin Bacon, kidnapping him on Christmas Eve, taking him to nowhere, and having a little Christmas celebration. And there's this really funny scene where they realize that they think that because they don't know, like they don't really know what movies are. They think that Kevin Bacon actually like they didn't realize he's an actor. They think like he did all of those things. They think that like as like in real life. And when they're talking to him on the ship on the way back, they find out that he's like not actually some great hero who like saved a town with dancing. They're like, "You're an actor? Ew. Dude, actors suck. Ew, you're a piece of shit, dude. You're an asshole. I fucking hate actors." Like, they're both. I'm like, this feels like an inside joke between James Gunn and and Kevin Bacon. And it's just really fun. It's really not that much besides. It's just a really fun thing, and I like seeing the characters do stuff. I like the characters, and it's just kind of like a relaxed, very inconsequential episode with them. I have a soft spot for characters who are just big fellas. I think that's part of why I love Drax. Kat knows I love the big fellas. And there's like, they go to Kevin Bacon's house, and there's all these like Christmas decorations outside, and Drax just he's just like pogging out, and he runs over to a little inflatable elf decoration, and he just picks up. He goes, "I need this silly little man. I must have this silly little man." And that feels like something that I would write. It's great. Yeah, they abduct Kevin Bacon. They chase him around his house. It's like a horror movie, but it's framed as a comedy. Like, genuinely terrifying situation. It's like Strangers. And then they beat up some police officers and take him to nowhere, and they have a little Christmas party, and it's great, and I loved it. Then we moved on to Volume 3, and Volume 3 is interesting. It's definitely my favorite. I think overall it's the one that I like the most. And is that a popular opinion? I don't know. I'd actually be really curious to know, because Kat, she's like the flip of me. She thinks that she prefers 2 to 3. She's already seen all these before. So she's rewatching them with me. And she obviously saw Volume 3 very recently because it just came out. Volume 3 is really dark, and I think that's cool. And I enjoyed the tone of this movie a lot. It's much closer to the Suicide Squad, which, oh my god, is this the movie that James Gunn wants to make? There's many ways where Kat said this, and I was like, I see what you mean. I wouldn't be surprised. Where she said that basically it feels like this was James Gunn's, he knew that this was going to be his last movie with Marvel, and he was like, fuck it, I'm gonna push the envelope as hard as I can of what's been in a Marvel movie thus far, like a mainline MCU film. And it's pretty dark and pretty intense in a way that I liked a lot. I guess now it's well known that this is the first on-screen F-bomb that's ever been dropped in a Marvel movie, which I'm actually kind of surprised about. But I guess, yeah. Pretty sure you get one fuck in a PG-13 film. I'm pretty sure that's like the limit. That you have like one fuck, you get like 3 shits or something. And then any more than that, and it has to go up to R. There's literally like you have a curse word budget with the MPAA. Sorry, the MPA, now that they've, re-identified. This, okay. I'm so bad at structuring my thoughts on films. The premise is, okay, so so this is a very rocket centered film. This is really about Rocket Raccoon. And his backstory and why the fuck is he like this? And then kind of developing him out a little further and getting some closure on his character, which I thought was very compelling. It's pretty well, I think, again, also because a lot of people are talking about this, there's a lot of animal cruelty in this film. And if you're sensitive to that, I can see this being like very upsetting to you. I think it's done in good taste. Because it's always framed as like a horrible, horrible thing. And there are definitely parallels to like real life animal experimentation. It's basically tackling a very dark, very real subject matter in a way that, at least personally, I think is tasteful. It's not like gross, where it's like, and I can at least, if you're sensitive to that stuff, I could see having a really tough time. And personally, that's I asked Kat why she preferred 2 over this one, and she said that a lot of it was just that like she really doesn't like that stuff, which is totally fair. I thought it was going to be way worse. I'd heard about the animal cruelty and people being like very kind of disturbed by that, and I actually thought it was going to be a lot worse. There was never really a point during this. Maybe I'm just a fucking monster and a horrible human being. But there was never really a point in the film where I felt like super uneasy, disturbed, like, you get kicked around a little bit. There's a little bit of squealing when they're on the surgery table. God, I sound awful. This is I'm heartless. But I don't know. But for me specifically, it's like I feel like if I saw an actual video of animal cruelty, it would probably affect me a lot more. In my mind, it doesn't really hit me that hard because these are all like CGI animals. So I think there's like a disconnect for me. If I saw like I love animals, right? I do. I feel like if I saw, and thankfully, I'm not gonna test this theory. If I saw a video of animal cruelty, it would probably really upset me, like actual animal cruelty or death or something. But like in fiction, it doesn't really put me. I can kind of like suspension of disbelief, like put it in its own little area in my mind. So that didn't affect me too much. Also, like I don't know, there's. Okay, the part of the problem is that I've watched JoJo. I've watched and read through JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. And so my bar for animal cruelty is pretty on-screen animal cruelty is pretty high. You want to talk about stuff edging the line of being tasteful? Yeah, I'm personally glad that Araki got out of the thing. It's like I get it. So one thing you should know, again, hey, on the topic of being sensitive to animal violence, so in the early parts of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, this is a side tangent, very, very side tangent, Araki employs a lot of animal harm to, as like a very quick, easy way to make the audience hate a character. There are multiple villains who are introduced by them either hurting or just straight up killing a dog. Sometimes other animals, but usually a dog. And the reason for that is that Araki actually loves dogs. He's a big animal lover. And so in his mind, the most evil, hateable thing that anyone could do is harm or kill a dog. So when he needs the audience, he's like, fuck, how do I introduce a character really fast and make the audience hate them so they're invested in the main characters beating the fuck out of them? Oh, I'll have them kill a dog. How do I make the audience hate a literal baby who is the villain in one episode? I'll have him kill a dog just randomly for no real reason. It's very much edging the line of being tasteful, and he definitely grew out of it as he got better as a writer. It generally, the last instance of it, I think, really happens in part 4 at the very beginning. Mind you, it's probably the most horrific example of it. If you've seen that, that's a fucking insane. I was like, this is a little much, dude. Thankfully, he really eases up on it to the point where after, like, once you're, like, after, like, the first half of part 4, it's basically all, he doesn't do that anymore. And it's much easier to get through. He's found other ways to make villains horrible people that you want to hate. But yeah, so that's my bar for like disturbing on-screen animal violence. So, this, did not affect me too much. So I was able to not like look past it. It's definitely very like, it definitely hits, right? It definitely hits like this is a horrible thing that's going on. Like I registered it. It just didn't make me there's like a meta sense of you being like turned off of a movie. There's a way in which you can be disturbed where it invests you more in the movie, and there's ways where it can actually make you turned off from it, where you actually like want to get away and you kind of like don't like it, and it takes you out of the movie, right? Some people who are more sensitive to that stuff probably would have the latter reaction. I had the former, I suppose. But anyway. I thought, okay, yeah, that stuff is like really strong. It's hard to put, someone kicking an animal into a cage into a film, and you don't get at least a little emotionally invested. The whole deal with the high evolutionary, probably like, I would wager one of the better Marvel villains. I haven't seen that many Marvel films, but I would say probably in the MCU, probably one of the better villains. Excuse me. And he doesn't have to be like, and I like that he's really evil. He's really like a horrible, rancid person. And there's really no attempt to make him sympathetic at all. It has an obsession with like perfecting the evolutionary process. and a what they kind of suggest at the end of the film, a hatred of the natural beauty of things. He is almost incapable of appreciating natural beauty and the way that things are, which is a theme in the movie of who are you really? There's a couple characters like Rocket, like Drax, where like Mantis sort of by the end she wants to find out who she is. Like, who are you really? And being able to appreciate that person. Gamora, Peter having to realize that Gamora is not the same person that he knew before, and he has to like respect that and not try to force it. Wow, themes, guys. Letting things be as they naturally are. So the high evolutionary is like a is a great symbolic villain who represents this struggle that the characters might have or they might be going up against of either not accepting themselves or not feeling accepted or not knowing, who they are. And that in that way, he kind of ties into everyone else. Obviously, mainly with Rocket, he has that a very literal relationship there. But there's a nice thematic bridge with the villain that was I would say kind of missing in the previous one. Right? Like, Ego doesn't have too much to do thematically with characters who are not Peter. So the other characters do get stuff, right? They get stuff to do, which is good, like I mentioned, that I enjoyed. But the High Evolutionary does have, like, connections. There's at least something thematically that it makes it feel a little more whole. I really like the intensity in this movie. There is, this very... oh god, like definitely like a stomach dropping sequence where you're going through it's Rocket's, his backstory, which we flashed to a few times, but there's a very extended sequence in it where he's in the cage with these other animals who've been experimented on and augmented with these really bizarre, cybernetic parts and things like that. And they're all happy and cute. They're happy, fun animals. There's a big walrus, and his name is Teefs. I love that. and I'm just like, oh, fuck. All these fucking animals are gonna die, aren't they? Oh, this is gonna suck. I'm like, fucking, oh my god, this is gonna suck. Not in like that it's going to be bad quality, but like I'm just not looking forward to what this is obviously setting up for. Like I don't want to be sad, man. But dude, that scene where Rocket, he finds out that they're going to be incinerated the next day, and he's going to be experimented on so they can take his brain out. And then he breaks all of them out, and then all of a sudden from off screen, just boom, and all of them get fucking shot up and die except for Rocket. And it's just like, fuck, dude. And the High Evolutionary is just, he's got the blicky, and he's just killed all of Rocket's cute little animal friends. It's like, fuck. And oh my dude, this, and then when Rocket like just lashes out at him in a rage, and leaps at him and just scratches the fuck out of his face. That whole scene is like, when I talk about intense, like so okay. We watched this on like a decent quality cam rip because I didn't want to go to the fucking theater after we'd been at a con all weekend. We watched this on a pretty decent quality cam rip, so the audio was pretty good. Also subtitled, thankfully. And the video was also pretty good, but it's that cam rip kind of thing where you're like, the lighting's a little weird just because of the way that the camera's capturing light. So like, I don't know if this is gonna if it's maybe lit a little differently, but at least when we watch, it's really fucking dark with just these few kind of like orangish lights, and you're getting these close-up shots of just like scratching and clawing and like fucking eyeball widening and like just a screaming and growling and grunting, and like the High Evolution, just like this shot of his mouth open shrieking in pain. I'm like, fuck, this is like really dark. This is really intense. I thought it was great. And then you kind of find out later, I think that Rocket actually like permanently fucked up his face from that because it's a mask. It's actually a mask that he's been wearing. Because I noticed, like, when we see him in the present day, he's got what looks like this weird, it's like his face is stretched over like a skull or something like that. And in the flashbacks, he doesn't have that. He just looks like, like a regular person. And then you find out at the end of excuse me. At the end of the movie, that it was in fact a mask he's been wearing. Again, tying into the idea that he can never accept things for what they are. He couldn't just accept that his face was fucked up, or even just get reconstructive. I don't know, maybe like a reconstructive. He had to literally put on a mask to mimic his original, there was an exact imitation of his original face. I think that's what the implication is, that Rocket fucked up his face beyond repair. Yeah, I don't know, like just a really compelling villain. I liked, oh man, I haven't even talked about like the pacing or anything. It's very fast paced, which I liked. I liked that we were going from A to B, and it was happening pretty snappy, and things felt motivated, and the film flowed in a pretty organic way. Again, like, felt like James Gunn is very good at writing these stories where there's like a lot of characters and there's things happening, but all the motivations are very consistent, and it all nothing feels like forced, like, oh, we have to put this character in here, like, oh, how do we do that? It's like, oh, okay, no, the character has a reason to be there, kind of thing. Like a real understandable reason to be there, and it doesn't feel very what's the term? Contrived. Excuse me. Oh, fuck. Adam Warlock. I should talk a little bit about Adam Warlock. So, I found out he was in this movie. And that piqued my interest because Adam Warlock is my favorite Marvel Comics character. I own the Jim Starlin Adam Warlock collection. The Jim Starlin's whole run with that character, and it's phenomenal. I love it. I'm a big fan. A lot of people don't know what his deal is, and it piqued my interest that he was in this film. But from Kat's description of what he's like, I was prepared for him to be basically nothing like the comics version. And yeah, it's basically what it is. So if you're a big Adam Warlock fan like me, do not, which there, if there's like 5 of us in the world, do not go into this expecting an actual adaptation of like really any version of the character. My favorite is the only one I've really read is Jim Starlin's, but it's weird. It's a weird character to adapt because Adam Warlock's whole backstory, he was basically created as like a little joke. He was created as a joke to poke fun at a different writer at Marvel because he was like an objectivist. It was this whole thing. Basically, Adam Warlock was created in a one-off story to be a joke, and then they just had this character laying around and like, yeah, what do you want to do with him? I guess we'll have him do this whole storyline with the High Evolutionary, who is, I want to say, pretty different from this movie's version of that. He's much more of like he's like a villain, but he kind of moves towards being a little more like neutral evil mad scientist, if that makes sense. Whereas in this, he's just like the horrible scumbag piece of shit. Adam Warlock has this whole bit where he like goes and fights the animal men on the High Evolutionary's Counter-Earth planet, which is supposed to be his perfect society, which was adapted for this movie. Yeah, it's weird. It's like, it feels like Gunn took some parts of the Adam Warlock character and or some of the storylines and just sort of distributed them around and used them in sort of different ways. He was not created by the Sovereigns in the comics. He was just created by some random scientists. So yeah, it's weird because I feel like, okay, so in my opinion, the best Adam Warlock stuff, the quintessential Adam Warlock imagery is him sitting on an asteroid in space and moping around, thinking about existentialism. What's cool about him as a character in the Starlin stuff is that he's basically in the previous run where he's on Counter-Earth, right? He was basically like a Jesus figure. There's a lot of biblical parallels in his story. He's basically Jesus who's come to fight sin, fight the devil that's corrupting this society. And by Starlin's run, he's basically sort of reimagines the character a little bit as what I would describe as, it's like Jesus if he was very self-conscious and didn't have everything figured out. He's essentially just like a Superman with, superhuman strength and speed, and he can fly, and he's super durable, he can breathe in space, and he is immortal, he doesn't have to eat, he doesn't have to procreate, he is in some sense a perfect being, and that means that he's also incredibly lonely. He's a horribly lonely being who doesn't feel like he has any kind of purpose in life, and he doesn't know what he needs to do. He goes on these adventures, and then they're done, and he's like, what do I do now? Like, I have no goals. I'm never going to die. What do I do? It's like questioning, his immortality. He has no like existential struggles in the ways that we do, right? He feels like he can't relate to anybody, and that's like what's great about him is him like grappling with some real philosophy stuff and going on some very crazy adventures, some really, oh god, what the fuck just happened? I'm getting an error on Adobe. Okay, so we had a crash, a very scary crash just now, but I'm back. Ended up losing the left audio channel of the first hour of the podcast, but I fixed it. That was really scary. Thought I lost 2.5 hours of audio. No, we're all good. We're all good. Anyway, yeah, that's the cool stuff about Adam Warlock. He's a cool character. And in this film, he is not that character, but I almost feel like if, like, where he is at the end of the movie could be, like, a setup for that, if that makes sense. Like, if they were ever going to do anything more with him, it would, you could totally do that kind of existential, what do I do now, kind of what's my purpose, character. As it stands in the film, he's just kind of there. It almost feels like Gunn didn't quite know what to do with him. Maybe he's more involved in like the 2009 Dan Abnett run of the comics, and that's why Gunn felt the need to include him. I feel like I've seen a bunch of those like timeline, those just nightmarish timeline things where it's like a bunch of just like 100 logos that of like the new things that they're gonna be releasing in the next 5 years or whatever. And I feel like I've seen Adam Warlock on there a bunch of times, and it's always been fake. And what's funny enough is that I could actually believe that they never really meant to do anything with Adam Warlock, because in the movie he has this weird little diamond shaped thing on his forehead. In the comics, that's the Soul Stone. That's the Soul Stone, which was a thing that they just took that from the Warlock character and gave it to Vision in the MCU, where Vision is, like, Adam Warlock was originally created as like a perfect super-powered android, and he has the Soul Stone in his forehead, and they just kind of gave that to Vision. Yeah, like, I don't know, funny detail. Like, they weren't saving it for him. They weren't at all. So that's part of it. That's the thing you can do in the comics, is he can just incinerate you on a molecular soul. He can destroy your soul, kind of thing. Yeah, so he's fine. There aren't really any Jesus parallels besides the fact that he is named Adam, and, well, Adam wasn't Jesus, but, you know, biblical parallels, and also a random recreation of the creation of Adam, I think is the name of the painting, with, you know, him like reaching out and touching, like pointing his finger and touching God, but except he's in the position God is in, and Peter is in the position that Adam is in. It's really weird. It feels like kind of dumb, like a reference to an allegory from the comics, but like a weird one. I don't know. It happens for a second, so it's not a big deal, but yeah, and it has basically, like, there is zero. He's not God. There is very little God. It's kind of anti-God stuff in this, actually. Like, the High Evolutionary literally says there's no God, so that's why I stepped in. So I don't know. Maybe there's thematically, if I really thought about it, there's something going on there, but I don't know. No, but I really like this film. I liked it. Was a little heavier on the drama and the darkness than the previous films, which I liked a lot. I think it was like, I liked the balance. It's a balance that really works for me. There's some legitimately funny stuff. I think what I really liked, some people could be turned, actually Kat said that she was turned off by this, and I get it, of like scenes of having like a joke followed immediately by something really serious. And if I'm going to be honest, I prefer that to the other way around, where when there's a serious moment and then like we have to tag it with a joke, it almost feels like if it gets too excessive, it can feel kind of like it's sort of cheapening the drama or cheapening the drama. Or like I said, it's like a lack of faith in the material kind of thing. But the other way around, when you're having like a funny, lighthearted joke and then suddenly something really serious happens, I think it makes the drama cut way harder. I think it makes the everything feel more intense because you as the audience are very thrown off. You're given like whiplash in a way that feels, I don't know, realistic. Like tragedy just strikes out of nowhere in real life, There isn't like a build up to it. You're not always safe. In real life, you're not in a safe comic relief scene. You'll be telling a joke, and then the next day something horrible happens. You're having fun, and then you get a call that something bad's happened. I like that a lot. I think that made it cut a lot harder, and makes, I don't know. It's like it makes me appreciate the humor more in like an in-universe sense. Like I can see like. When Mantis says that they love Drax because he makes them laugh, right? I can see, like, sometimes horrible things happen around them, and Drax is, like, the one guy who consistently makes them laugh and lightens their spirits. And that's, like, a real, like, thing that they cherish about him as a friend or, their family, right? As they like to call it. That's like a real, it's like a valuable thing. And I can see like you can imagine other situations where something really bad is happening. And then afterwards, Drax makes people laugh. And like, oh, I see how they function. I liked it a lot. What I really liked? I loved all of the practical stuff in this movie. I'm a sucker for nice practical effects. One of those guys. And it kind of rectified a problem I sort of had with the first two films. More so with the second one. Which was, there's kind of like, it was a nitpick. It's something that I've kind of just gotten used to over the years of, digital green screens being more of a thing. But, like, yeah, there's a bit of, especially in Volume 2, with a lot of the time they spend on the planet, shots where there's a real, like, Star Wars prequel effect. That makes sense. Where it's, like, it feels like they did a Google search for, like, beautiful sci-fi planet landscape, wallpaper HD. And then they threw like a PNG of a character on top of it. Like there's some scenes where it's like, oh, we are in a green screen thing and that has been digitally zoomed out and to give the illusion of scale. And I don't know, I see the seams a little too much in a way that takes me out of it. This movie had a way more practical sets specifically. I don't mind CG effects now. I mean, the effects are so good that like it doesn't really matter. But I loved like the look of the like OrgoCorp section. That was so cool, where everything is like made of organic matter and like bone and muscle tissue. Fluid, weird goop. The doors open and it's like flaps of it's like area. It's like almost like the let's say like lungs opening and closing or something like I thought that was so cool. Great, like whoever was in charge of that, like the set design, the team that put that together. Wow, that was great. They did a fantastic job with that. What else? And then the other kind of interesting location when they're on Counter Earth. So like one of the things that's funny is that Counter Earth in this is it's made to be like in the comics. It's a perfect society is what it's supposed to be. and it looks in the movie like 1950s idealized America. Like, that's very much the aesthetic that it's going for. It reminded me a lot of like Nuketown from COD, and which is funny because it does, the city itself gets nuked, or the planet gets nuked at the end. Something that I thought, like, I don't know how intentional this was, but I thought about it and I'm like, those original, the Adam Warlock, like, Counter-Earth storyline was written in, I want to say, the 60s, like late 60s maybe. Might have the timeline a little wrong, but like, at the time that it existed, at the time that the story that this is based off of was written, that's kind of just what America looked like. that was kind of just what it looked like, and it wasn't intending. There's a very different context that both of these are being shown in. This is obviously playing to the stereotype, idealized image of 1950s America, which makes sense because the High Evolutionary was intending to mimic what he saw as like the highly refined Earth culture that he saw when he was on Earth, human culture that he saw while he was on Earth. But in the comics, it's like they were just kind of depicting what the world looked like. It was supposed to be, he was just recreating the Earth as it was, not like a necessarily idealized version of it, an idealized society with idealized people who didn't have like human flaws, but the society itself, that there's very different context. So I think it's funny that it was kept as that 1950s kind of look, suburban look to it, and urban. I get, they go all over, but just a funny observation. I like that he kept it like that. I like that James Gunn kept it into that sort of look. Just on a funny detail, like that none of them know how to drive a car. It's like they could pilot these crazy, complex spaceships, these sci-fi machines, but like a 1960s Pontiac is like, they can't figure this shit out. Like, it's Peter doesn't know how to drive, Nebula can't drive. It's fun. It's like a fun little, oh yeah, he what he say, like he left Earth when he was 8, he never learned how to drive. Yeah. I don't know, I liked it. I liked the resolution. Oh, I love Cosmo. I love the dog Cosmo with her little Russian accent. She's cute. Good doggy. I like that Kraglin gets his moment where he actually figures out how to use the whistle and use the arrow. I don't know. I think Gunn is just really good at writing pretty satisfying character arcs. I like where everyone ends up by the end of this. It is an open-ended conclusion. Definitely keeping the characters around, but like, hey, they're gonna take a break from being like the team, and Peter wants to go visit his surviving family on Earth. Mantis wants to go just take some time to herself. Nebula and Drax are gonna stay and take care of Nowhere. And like Gamora, I like that they didn't force Gamora and Peter into a relationship. That feels like it would have been so. It's like, oh, they fall in love because she sees how he's actually such a nice guy, and they didn't do that. The most you get is there's a little bit of her, like, she's very fed. I liked how fed up she was with all this shit for a lot of the movie. But then by the end, she's like, okay, I can kind of see it. The most you get is I can kind of see it. And that's like good enough. That's satisfying enough for me as an audience member. And she just goes back with her newfound family, much like She found the Guardians originally. They all found each other. She's found her new space pirate friends. And they seem to just get along famously. Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea of Rocket going from this character who was extremely hostile and standoffish, and now he's changed enough as a person, as a raccoon, to be the leader of a group and not just like some guy who just kind of hangs around and makes fun of people and gets people into trouble. And he's you know, the responsibility of taking a leadership role was cool. I think that's a cool way to leave his character off on. Yeah, I don't know. I like this one a lot. I think that for me specifically, I liked Volume 2 and 3 a lot. If I'm going to compare them, I would say that it's like, it's very much like what kind of a balance of tones you like. Personally, I usually like stuff that is a bit darker and a little heavier and more dismal. So all of the very serious, fucked up stuff in this movie just went over pretty well with me. And it just in a way that I just it's a good problem for a movie to have, right? Because it's like I don't dislike it. It's that I think it's a really good movie. I think like 1 and 2 are like good movies. But there's like that something can be like a really good movie in your opinion, but it doesn't have like a specific thing that like hits for you. Like you can recognize this is a good movie. I like the characters, the dialogue, the directing, all that. It's good. But there has to be like a special little thing that appeals specifically to you that like really works for you. And Volume 3, I wouldn't say is like a favorite movie of mine, but it is a lot closer to something that is like works specifically for me. It's the closest one, I would say, which is why it edges out the other 2 movies in the trilogy, specifically 2, I guess. Yeah, it definitely, I can totally see the case for someone, especially if you're like, maybe like a younger viewer, like a kid or something, like watching these movies, and they become like their favorite movies. I can definitely see that, because it is very, in like the current film landscape, there's not a lot of movies, like, I think James Gunn movies have that effect on people. I think like Scott Pilgrim had that on people. I know because I'm dating someone who had a big reaction to that movie. Yeah, his like style, his way of like writing characters with like a lot of heart and the mix of like humor, and I think the licensed songs too also give it a really unique identity. Like, it definitely has that quality of like, I could see someone watching this and being like, whoa, I've never seen a movie like this before. I didn't know a superhero movie could be like this. And these being like some of their favorite films. And then I think is like totally like, I can see it, I'm just not that guy, if that makes sense. But I like these movies quite a bit. I'm glad I watched them. I'm glad she showed them to me. I'm also glad to be finishing up this podcast very soon, because hot damn, I've been talking for a while. Hot diggity darn. Anything else I wanted to say? Not really about the movies. Yeah, outro time. Thank you so much if you've been listening to me ramble. If you've listened this far, whatever I say at the end of these. I have the Patreon, I got the main channel, there's going to be a video on there pretty soon. What the hell? What else do I say? It's kind of, oh yeah, leave a comment down below if you feel so inclined. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below, but please phrase them in the form of a question, because I'm not just going to read your thoughts out loud. That's what I say. Yeah, I'm going to go render this shit out and make some food. Bye.